You talked about optimal load earlier on. Now, I thought this was brilliant, especially when you talk about the ICU flow and you talk about the cost of keeping everybody busy. So we designed the work to give everybody like maximum load there. And you're actually making the argument to go, well, actually, that's not actually very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that the fact that this starts with is most organizations, and I alluded to this earlier, just take on too much work. The data are probably best in the R&D world, where there's a couple studies out there that suggest that most organizations probably have 3 to 5 times as many projects in progress as they have resources to execute. Um, and we see this in other places, although I think it's a little harder to measure with, a high degree of accuracy. But I think it's pretty close to an established fact that most places take on too much. And I think one of the reasons for that, as I said earlier, is I think a lot of organizations have a lot of good ideas, and it's hard to say no to good ideas. But the consequence of this, I think, is really damaging. And I think it's exacerbated by, I think, the view that many managers have that the way that you maximize the productivity of your organization is just to make sure that everybody's busy all the time. And it just turns out that's just not true. You don't maximize system performance by making sure that every element is busy. And again, this is a case where I think in other facets of our life, we understand this very well. Think about leaving a busy city on Friday afternoon in the summertime, like Boston, is a perfect example where I live. Everybody tries to get out of the city on Friday afternoon. If I put a car on every available piece of highway, right, what happens to the throughput of that highway system? It goes to zero, right? It's a huge traffic jam and nobody can go anywhere, right? If we want to maximize the sort of throughput of the highway system, we don't fully load it because there's some slight variations in how fast the cars go and braking and so on and so forth. And it turns out that the same is very much true in organizations, that the loading that maximizes the performance of the system will not keep everyone busy at every moment. And so we talk about this principle, regulate the flow, which basically boils down to every organization needs some kind of strategy for making sure they have about the right amount of work in the system. And I think what's a little tricky is it's not something that you can probably in most cases really calculate. You got to learn your way into it, meaning you got to experiment with a little bit more and a little bit less. But the basic rule is that if the work is not moving, moving from person to person, hitting dates and so on and so forth, almost for sure you've got too much work in the system. And how that strategy will manifest in different places, we could talk about. But the basic idea is that managers need some system for really assessing, is the work moving? And if it is, okay, maybe I could safely add another project. If the work is not moving and there's long time delays, almost for sure I got too much in there and I need to figure out a way to cut back a little bit.